Okay, this is part 9 of the shoot 'em game creation video. In this one, what we're going to do, currently we've got 2 players and split screen. What we're going to do is we're going to add support for 3 and 4 players, but that's going to have a knock-on in that we're going to have to refactor a few bits because we hardwired. So if we just quickly look at game container, we've got a couple of fields that we use for holding player 1 and 2 score. We assume when we handle and work out who shot who, that if player 1 has been shot, it must have been player 2. Obviously, that's not going to work in a 4-player or 3-player game because we won't know. So we've got to refactor a few bits. But let's start by creating some more viewports. So if we go to the viewport manager, we're just going to create another couple of methods to create 3 and 4 viewports. Okay, so we're just going to find somewhere that is outside one of the other methods, and you can spot where this is by looking for the start of a method. So I've found center view. So I'm in viewport manager, and I'm just going to create my new method above that, and then I know I'm happy and I'm just at the class level. Okay, so I'm going to keep the naming similar. So I'm going to say public void create 3 viewports, because that's how I named the other ones. And so I'm just creating a skeleton. I'm not putting any code in it yet, and I'm going to create the other one. Void create 4 viewports. Okay, so I'm going to create the 3 viewports first, and then what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to use most of that code to create the 4 viewport view. Okay, so I'm going to go up to 2 viewports, and I'm going to copy the first 2 lines, which is to clear all the viewports. So I'm copying that from create 2 viewports, and I'm going to go back down to create 3 viewports. So I've created my full screen one. Now I'm going to create the other viewports. So I'm going to say gm.enginemanager.viewport.add range, and I'm going to say player view. So I'm going to use the player view, which has got the ability to create some viewports. Right, if the picker, the helper, appears and it's obscuring what you're looking at, just press escape and you can make it disappear. It's come up again there. So we're going to say view, hang on a minute, dot viewport, and you can see there's quads. So we've used the full and we've used the pairs, but now we're going to go for the quad one. Okay, the region is going to be the whole screen. Pick the wrong one there. The screen size. The split, now there's 3 different ways of splitting it: vertically, horizontally, and equally, which gives you like quadrants. So we're going to go for view split dot equal, so we get like 4/4 of the screen, and then we have to give the names for the viewport. So I'm just going to put this on the next line down, and just like I did when I did the 2 viewports, I had this new list string. Okay, so I'm going to say new list string parentheses, and then in the curly braces I'm just going to put 4 strings representing the names I want to give to the viewports. Now these are generally for debugging purposes, but you can get access to for display purposes if you want, but they're for when we're debugging, so we know which viewport we're talking about. Okay, make sure there's a semicolon at the end. So that just creates the viewports. Right, now we don't want 4 for a 3-player game, so we only want the first 3. So when we create the players list of viewports, so we're just going to say new list. Remember, that's just some numbers with the viewport numbers. We're just going to use viewports 1, 2, and 3. The 4th one exists, but we're just going to ignore it. Okay. Right, so then we're going to just copy this code, well, all of this code from create two viewports. It's going to be identical, so I'm just going to copy that and I'm just going to put it after I've set up my players. Okay, now there is an argument that we should refactor that. I'm not going to worry about that here, but yeah, you should, because I keep using the same code. So you could easily create a method to do that, which would reduce your duplication. Okay, but I'm not too bothered. Right, so the next bit is to create 4 viewports. Now, the nice thing about this is that it's going to be identical code to the 3. So let's copy all of it. Oops. Copy all the code from viewports for 3, put it in 4, and the only thing we need to change is make sure we include that 4th viewport. Okay, that is the only difference. Everything else is the same. Now, when we currently, if we just quickly look at game container, in the display method, we have a fixed position to put the player 1 and player 2 score. Okay, and that was okay for that because we only had 2 players. But when we got 3 and 4, it's trickier to put the information on screen. Okay, so what we could do is we could use the viewport that the player's using as a reference to where to display their score. Okay, we can do it that way, and you can do it by creating just a couple of methods in the viewport manager that give you the top and left. But actually, and I was going to do that, but actually it's easier. Is it easier? We'll do it. We'll do it a different way. I'll do it using an array. So if we just look at what we've done in Viewport Manager, we've created 2 new methods. One to create 3 viewports using the quad method of player view, and that should be okay. All right, and then we got 3 and a 4, so we can create more viewports. The other thing we need to do is create a player 3 and a player 4. Okay, so if we just right click and say on code in the Solution Explorer and just say add class, let's create one called player 3. Let's add another one. I'll just zoom that in while I've got it on. Add another one. So where is it? Add new class. I just clicked on code with my right button. Next one called player 4. Zoom that in. Now, if we just go to player 2, what we can do is copy all the code from player 2. We need to make sure that we copy the engine import. So let's just copy that first. So go to player 3, put the using statements in. Go to player 4, put the using statements in. The other thing we need to do is make our player 4 class public and inherit actor. Do that for player 3 as well. So make the class public inherit from actor. Okay, so go back to player 2. Let's copy the 2 methods from player 2. Now we're doing copy paste here, so we need to make sure we make things change. So let's just put that in player 3. It'll break. Don't worry about that yet. Let's do it in player 4 as well. Okay, so we need to change the name of the constructor to player 4. So I'm just going to copy that, double click player 2 and paste over. And that'll fix the errors. Do the same in player 3. So copy the player 3 name of the class, double click on player 2, and that should fix. Right, so let's look at player 3 first. So let's look at the keys. I'm not going to worry about what the keys are at the minute, but I'm going to change the pad number. So player 3 is going to be pad 3. So change this number to 3. Okay. The position Well, the base call up here has 3 values, a color and a number. Right, this is player 3, so let's change the player number to that. Remember, if you can't remember what all these parameters are, just move your mouse over base and it'll tell you. So it says vector 2, start position, color, called color, and player number. So I'm going to change the color, so I'm going to pick yellow. You can pick whatever color you want. And then where do I want player 3 to start? Well, I want player 3 to start in the bottom left-hand corner. So I'm going to say 100. So just 100 in. But then I want to say 100 pixels from the bottom. So if I say gm.engineManager, my pick has died. dm.engineManager.worldRectangle.bottom. And if I say take 100 away, that makes me go up 100. So I'm right at the bottom of the screen, but I want to go up 100. Okay, so the vector 2 value, this bit, is the start position. So I'll pick color yellow. So let's go off and do player 4. So player 4 I want to be on the right hand side, so this bit's okay. But I want to be at the bottom again, so I'm going to do the same thing. If you make sure you've got a space around the cursor, the picker should work properly. So engineManager.worldRectangle.bottom minus 100. Now, we've got one of them situations where we've got a line that scrolls horizontally in order for us to see all the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break the line there, and I'm going to break it after the vector 2. Okay. Just so it makes it fit on screen and it's readable. I need to change the pad to 4 because this is player 4. So this should work across, I don't know whether I changed that, and player 3. Let me just double check that. Yeah, I didn't. That's the problem with copy pasting. So the control code, like I said, it's not the ideal way to do it, but I wanted to demonstrate to you. That doesn't need to change. The keys at some point you need to change because these are going to be duplicated for player 1, for player 2, 3, and 4 because I haven't changed. They're up, down, left, right, both of them. So you need to pick different keys. Up to you which keys you pick. I'm not going to worry about that now. Okay, so we created that. The other big problem we've got, if we go to bullet, when the bullet hits a player, it creates a message, which is fine, and it says who was hit. But that message doesn't tell me who hit the player. So we need to change that a little bit. Now, in order to do this sensibly, what we need to do is create a class that can hold the information. It's basically a record, okay? And it'll hold all it's going to have is just a couple of numbers. What player was the shooter and who got hit? And then we can use that for scoring and everything else. So what we're going to do, right click on code, and we're going to say add class. And we're going to call it hit info. Okay. Now, because we just want this to hold raw data, we're going to change it to a struct. So we're just going to change the keyword from class to struct. We don't need to include any libraries for this because it's just going to hold 2 numbers, 2 integers. So we're going to make a public field called player hit and another one called player shooting, I'm going to call it. Okay, you might not think they're the greatest names, but we don't really care. Now that we've got that, we can go back to bullet and our hit something method, and we can change. So we're going to get rid of that line, player num, and what we're going to do is we're going to create this hit info object. So I'm going to say hit info, and you see it's come up in the picker now. I'm going to call it H because I only want it temporarily. I'm just going to say new hit info. Then we're going to set the value. So I'm going to say H dot the player that was hit, and that is p.playerNum, the one that we've identified. And we're going to set the player that shot, and that is our boss. That is the bullet's boss. So that is boss.playerNum. Okay. Then we're going to add the hit info to the message. So we're going to say m.object value equals h. An object can store anything because everything inherits from an object. Okay, so it's a great thing if you don't know what type of data you want to store. So we can put that in the message. So that's fine. So we're going to broadcast a message that's got who shot who. But anyone who was subscribing to this message, okay, player hit, they're going to need to be updated now to handle this new data. Okay. Now we know we can do this two ways. We can remember who is subscribing, or we can right click on this extra message types player hit and say find all references. Now here it'll show us every line of code. So it'll tell us the module it's in. So we can see actor does. We can see bullet does. Well, we know that because we just right clicked on that. We can see that the game container does. And we can see there's also a reference to this in extra message types. Well, there would do. That's where we defined it. Okay, so it shows you the code. So we know we've got to change the actor. So if we just double click on the actor one, it'll take us to the line of code where the subscription is. Okay, now on there, it runs this hit code. That's what we're going to need to change. So we're going to right click over hit and say go to definition. So this if statement's wrong now because we don't need to look at int value. We need to look at the hit info value. All right, so in order to make that work, we need to cast the object value into hit info. Okay, so we're going to say, so we're going to create a local variable, temporary variable, and we're going to say in bracket, oh dear, typed that a bit wrong. Hit info in brackets, that's the casting. I've got a bad shift key on this keyboard. So we're going to say message dot object value. So what that does is it says we know the object value is hit info. So let's just treat it. So it tells the compiler to treat it as an it info structure. We can then now interrogate that structure. So we can say, and we just replace this bit, and we can just say h.playerHit. If it's me, then we're going to do the invulnerability bit. Okay, remember that's all that the player's interested in. We're not bothered about scoring. The player's not interested in scoring. That's done by the game container. All right, so we just modified that. By creating that hit info object, we've made the message system flexible. So you can put lots of data in these messages if you need to, depending on what the message is for. Okay, so let's go down to the bottom where it says find symbol results, and we can see the other ones now. So in game container, if we double click on the subscribe line again, we get this thing handle scoring, which is actually just here. So we need to alter handle scoring. Okay, so that handles the new hit info message. Okay, so let's just set up the first bit. So we're just going to say, okay, let's have a hit info object, and that is going to be cast of message.object value. Now, previously we had two variables, score P2, score P1. That isn't going to work in this instance. What we're going to need to do is have something a little bit more automatic. Okay, so we could create four variables, but then that would make this code hideous to write. So what we're going to do instead, at the top of game container, we're just going to comment out score P1 and score P2. We don't want them anymore, so we're not going to delete them. We're going to comment them out for now, and then that will give us all the errors where that was being referenced. Okay. In its place, we're going to create an array. So we're going to say int, and then put square brackets to indicate that we're storing an integer array, and we're going to call it scores. And then we're going to make the size of it, and it's going to be 4 because there's going to be 4 players maximum. Okay. Now, what we're also going to do eventually, when we create the game container, we're going to say how many players want to play. So on the title screen, we're going to say, oh, we're having a 2-player game, 3-player game, 4-player game. Okay, so I'm just going to modify the game container constructor, and I'm going to say int num players. So we're going to give it how many players. Okay. Now we'll need to store that because we'll need to know how many players we've got. So we're going to say active players equals num players. Okay, so in the first line of the constructor, active players doesn't exist. So we're going to right click and we're going to say generate field. And you'll see it's created that for us. So it's an integer. So we've stored that and we can use that later on when we're displaying the scores and we're doing the hit checking and things like that for who's won and everything. We need to know how many people are playing. Okay, right. So if we stay in the game container constructor, this score 1 and score 2 reset isn't going to work anymore because they don't exist. So we'll just comment those out. We can delete them later when we're happy. Right, so we've got an array. Now this current year we looked at how we initialize an array, and we do that using a loop. Okay, so we're going to create a for loop. So we're going to say int I equals 0. Remember, the first item in an array starts at 0, and we're going to have to keep making adjustments because of that. So this is a standard loop. And we just say I plus plus. So we say start at 0, keep going while I is less than 4. Okay. And then I plus plus means increment I each time around the loop. All right. So we could write this like this. Okay, so we put the braces in to say there's a block. These are the statements that we want to happen in this loop. So we can say scores. Oh, come on. Scores I equals 0. Okay, but that takes up 4 lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little bit naughty. And I'm going to do this. I'm just going to put it all on one line. Okay, because we're just doing one thing inside the loop. We could actually write it even naughtier, but I'm not going to do that. You can do some crazy things with for loops to make your code compact, but I'm going to leave it like that. So what that's going to do is going to run through all 4 positions. Now it doesn't matter if we're only playing 2-player game. It's not going to hurt to just reset all of them. Okay, so that's going to reset. So we've now got an array to store our scores. Let's go back to our handle scoring. So I'm using the drop down. I'm going to select handle scoring. All this switch business is rubbish, including the game ended bit. So I'm just going to comment out the switch, and I'm going to comment out this if. Do not catch that last brace because that's the end of the handle scoring method. Okay, so I'm just going to comment all that code out, and I'm going to put my new code above. All right, now if we look at our it info and we say, hey, don't type this, just look. So we want to know who was shooting when someone got hit. We don't care who got hit in this case because we're not bothered about that. We just want to know who was shooting. So if player 1 was shooting, we can look at this number. So player 1's score is going to be at the first position in that array, but the first position in an array is at position 0. Okay, so to get from the player number to the array position, we need to subtract 1. So let's just see how this changes. So we say scores h.player shooting minus 1, and then we want to add 1. Now you can do that by saying plus equals 1, but there is a shorter way of adding 1. You can just say plus plus. That adds 1. It's called increment. Okay, useful for lots of things, increment. So instead of having to do a switch, we actually, because we've used an array, we can just do one line of code to do the scoring. Okay, the other thing we've got to do is check to 1. Now, we need to see who's got to 10 first. We've got an array and we've got a loop, so we need to check through all the players. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up a loop. So just like we did before, we can say int I equals 0, I is less than, and this time we're going to say active players, I plus plus. Okay, so that's going to create a loop. We're going to put the brace in because there's a few bits of code I want to do. So instead of doing this like we had before where we said, oh, if player one's got to 10 or player two's got to 10, then the game's ended. Well, what we want to do this time is as soon as we find one of the players who's got to 10, we're going to end the game. Okay, so we're going to put an if inside our for loop, and we're going to say if scores I equals 10, so you put equals equals for that, then what we're going to do is we're going to say yes, that person has won the game. So let's just put a couple more braces so we can mark a block for the if. So we're going to say game won. But we need to know who won the game. Okay, so what we need to do is say, right, well, it's whatever position we just looked at. So whatever the value of I is, but that doesn't give us the player number. We need to add one on. Remember, so if at position 0 in scores, that player's got to 10, that's actually player 1. So we need to say I plus 1. Now, obviously, we're saying run the game 1 method with a value. Before, it didn't have a parameter, but now we're giving it a value, a parameter. So that's now moaning and saying game 1 does not exist. Okay. Game has ended, I called it, sorry. Game has ended. Remember, that's what I called it down there. There it is. It'll give me a different error message now. It'll say, oh, no overload. So what it's basically saying is there is a method called game has ended, but there isn't one that has a one parameter. And that's because it doesn't at the minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a parameter to game has ended. That will stop that moaning. Okay. We've now got, I better not call it winner. Hang on. I'm going to call it winning player. Okay. So we've got that, and we can now write some code in game has ended, because at the minute, again, we're saying, oh, if score player 1 is 10, then player 1's 1, or player 2's 1. Now that ain't going to work for this now. So what we need to do is using that player number, we can just do this directly. Okay, and now we can jazz this up and make text and things like that. So let's just comment out these lines. Okay, and I'm going to change this one. I'm going to have the same format, so I'm going to game 1, put a couple of line breaks, and then I'm just going to put winning player. So I just put a number up, 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on what players won. Okay. I don't really need to change anything else for the winning. Okay. Now, that's refactored a lot of things. Before we're going to do another video where we move on and we handle all the multiplayer things, but we just want to test that this code works. So in the game container constructor, remember the constructor again is the one that just has public and then the name of the class. That's the constructor, the thing that is called when we say new. We currently create 2 viewports. So let's do create 4 viewports. And where we create player 1 and player 2, let's create a player, where is it, 3, and create a player, where is it, 4. Okay, I'll do a recap in a sec. Right, so we added in the viewport manager a method to do 3 viewports and a method to do 4. We altered, we created 2 more players, player 3, let's just check. So see, player 4, you see, when I checked on that, I haven't changed the number, player 4, and I haven't changed the color. So I'm going to pick lime for that one. It is using pad 4 though. So I created a player 4 and a player 3. Okay. In the bullet, we added more information into the player hit messages by creating a structure called hit info. Remember, if you right click over something and say go to definition, it'll take you there. And that just records 2 pieces of information. We could have more in there if we wanted to. And you could easily expand it now we've got that little structure. So bullet broadcasts that message now and stores it in object value of the message. We altered the actor's hit code that receives that message so that it extracts the hit info and examines it to find out if they've been hit. Okay, that was all we had to change in there. In game container, a bit bigger change. We haven't finished yet really, because we need to display the scores somewhere, and we'll fix that in a sec. We had to create an array to hold the 4 scores. We modified the game container so that we can accept how many players we want to play, and we created 4 players. Okay, so at the minute, if we try and build this, if you follow my video, you should get, I think, 1 or 2 errors. Oh, we've got score P1 and score P2. So we're not displaying the scores. So let's just comment all that code out for a minute in display, because I don't want that yet. I'm going to have to replace it anyway, because it was using the old score P1, score P2. What was the other error? Error list. Game container does not contain a constructor that takes no arguments. Now, we altered game container to accept a parameter or an argument. So if we just click on the error again, double click it. Once I zoom that in, you'll see. So this is in our title container. So at the minute, we want to test it with 4 players. So I'm just changing that and I'm saying, right, I'll tell it we want a 4-player game. So when we press D1, we'll start a 4-player game. So I'm going to build this again. It says build succeeded at the bottom there. Okay, so I should be able to run it. Let's just see what we get. Hopefully I haven't messed it all up. So 1 to start. And there you go. I have got 4 players. But because I haven't changed the keys, players 2, 3, and 4 are all using the same code. But you can see I've now got 4 viewports on screen. Now what's funny is player 2, the blue one, is in the bottom left-hand corner, but you'd probably expect player 2 to appear in the top right. When I wrote the player view code that creates the 4 viewports and does this, basically it's not player view, but it is split code. I reordered the viewports badly, the rectangles that I split it into. I have fixed this in a new version of the game engine, and if it bothers you that much, I'll tell you how to load the game engine. Oh, it's nearly caught up. Controlling 2 together. But for now, it doesn't matter. So let's sort out the scoring, and then we've finished this video, and then the next video going to show you how to handle the multiple game settings. Okay, so this was just to get the multiplayer going. Let's just get this scoring displayed. So let's quit out of that and go back to game container. So the scoring. Okay. Right. We want to display 4 scores on screen. The scores are held in an array, so we're going to use a loop for this. Okay. But we want to know where to store them. Now we could quite easily do something like this. Let me just, don't do this, but I'm just going to show you what we could do. We could say scores not for player 1. Then we could copy and paste that code. Okay, but we got an array. So instead of repeating code 4 times, let's just loop through that code 4 times. Okay, now we're going to need position information. Now the easiest way to do that is to create an array at the start. So we're going to create a fixed array of vector2 values, so an x and y value. So remember, the square bracket means this is an array of vector2, and I'm going to call it score pos. And we can set those 4 positions that we want the score to appear. Put a semicolon after that brace. So I've started a new line, and I'm going to put each score on a new line. So I'm going to say new vector2. So I want score 1 to be at 10, 10. Put a comma, to do the next one. So I'm going to put score 2 at, let's say gm.screensize.center.x plus 10. So 10 across from the center and at position 10 from the top of the screen. For player 3, I'm going to say GMC screen size dot. No, I'm not. I'm going to put it player 3 at 10, and then I want them at the bottom near, halfway down. So center. You can put these wherever you want. Plus 10. In fact, for simplicity's sake for this, but you can change these so they're positioned anywhere. And that's probably not a bad idea actually. So I'm going to say 10, 30, 10, 50. So they're going to be underneath each other. Player 1's going to get annoyed because they're all going to be on top of their screen. But hey, like I say, you can position these wherever you want. So we're going to have 4 positions. So that's an X and a Y position. Right, so back down to display, which is at the bottom. But if you can't find something, just use the picker. Oh, display, there you go. Right, so we're going to do a loop. And again, same setup. Start at 0. Loop while I is less than 4. So that will give us the values 0, 1, 2, 3. That's like using the range thing in Python. I++. So we're going to put our braces in to say let's do our code. So we're going to copy and paste this code into the brace, and we're not going to say that. We're going to say player, and then we're going to say I in brackets plus 1. So when I is 0, we're talking about player 1. So we need to add 1 to get to 1. And then we're going to display scores I. Okay. The position we're going to display it is going to be scores pos I dot x. So we're looking at the vector 2 at position I. We want the x part, and we're going to say score pos I dot y. Okay, and I'm going to change that alignment to top left. So that will loop 4 times, and it will be displaying a different score each time. Okay. So I'm just going to run that just to check that's working. And there you go. We've got score, and it says player 10, player 20, player 30, player 40. Well, it's standard concatenation mistake. So I'm saying player with a space plus the player number, and then I put the score right up to it. So after the plus, I'm just going to leave a space and then put another plus. Okay, so it's nicely presenting, just like you had to do in that exam question. So play it now, get a nice space. So let's try and navigate a player. So blue is player 2. I can't remember what my map looks like. There we go, I'm getting near to player 1 now. So I'm going to shoot player 1. I think that was M. So player 2's got a score. So I'm now going to turn and shoot with player 1 at player 2. If I can remember the key, it's G. And now I'm just going to try and find one of the other players. Now the yellow one's in the bottom left hand corner. So let's go down there. Like I say, to make this work nicer, so the scoring's working. But it would be better to position the player 2 scoring in the right place and the player 3 scoring in the right place. So you're not obliterating player 3's score. Oh, I should be able to shoot him. And the interesting thing is, because player 2, 3, and 4 have all got the same keys, and there you go. So the green one's just let his score go up, and it should go up again. Let's try and get, I don't know where they are, so let's try and see if we can get player 3 to them. There we go, we are. to make sure player 3 is working. And there you go, player 3 score's gone up. Oh, you got a double hit there as well. Okay, so that's it for this video. It's been quite a long video. In the next video, we'll tidy a few bits up, move those scores about, and set up the title screen so it says a little bit more than 1 to start, so we can play 2, 3, and 4 players. Okay. Thank you very much for watching.